know, we had a pretty good community out here maybe about 5 years ago, but now they just let it run.
There's this urban renewal downtown, displaced people who would have to find homes somewhere. Many undesirable ones came to this community.
It's deteriorated to a degree where it's really not safe around here anymore.
We'll be moving, because I don't want him to go to the school area because they beat up the kids too much.
We don't even have a hardware store with no grocery stores. We don't even have a drugstore.
Any neighborhood can decline, and once blight starts, it's very hard to stop. Madisonville, and I'm sure a lot of other neighborhoods around the country, began to deteriorate because everybody was minding his or her own business, cutting their own grass, taking out their own trash, and not being concerned enough about the total community. This community has been abandoned physically by the former residents, by the banks, by local government, by the financial industry in general. It has been redlined.
Well, redlining is the process or the designation of a neighborhood by lending institutions in that they no longer make loans to property owners or to buyers.
Redlining means that residents are unable to get loans to improve their homes from banks because of racial change.
Well, redlining is the practice of mortgage lenders to stay away from an area.
Savings and loans and commercial banks choose not to lend in an area because the area is deteriorating.
Redlining is not something that happens by accident. It's not some phenomena enforced by bankers who just don't want to make money. But redlining is something that begins from within a community, and the final blow is delivered from without. If you look around behind me and to the side, you'll see that for years there was absolutely no maintenance, and that was the beginning of the redlining phenomenon. In addition to the lack of maintenance on the part of the owners, the neighbors didn't complain. That added to the whole phenomena of redlining. The local government officials began to decrease services, and the community began to die even more. Its death knell was sounded finally when the residents who lived here found it undesirable to remain here and began to move out, taking what they could carry with them, leaving many of their treasures and possessions behind. This is something we didn't want to happen here in Madisonville.
Redlining is not as apparent in the community of Madisonville. Madisonville is a very nice old neighborhood with a lot of wooden houses, a great deal of history. Some of the houses are over 100 years old. It's a well-kept neighborhood. There are 14,000 people here with about a 50-50 split of black and white.
They have a very high degree of home ownership. They have 68% of the residents own their own homes. Most of the residents, if not one family, they are two family. They have relatively few large apartment complexes. The people in 1970 got together and decided that they would like to do something about maintaining their neighborhood. They got together and requested a FACE program, which is a federally assisted code enforcement program. At that time, the FACE programs were being discontinued about the same time or sometimes afterwards. Neighborhood housing services came along. It seemed to have all the elements that the people out here wanted. They wanted a voice in what was going to happen in their neighborhood.
I'm delighted that all of you have seen fit to give some of your time to us, to work with us in trying to put a neighborhood housing services together for Cincinnati. And I know we've all met, but let me just refresh your memory on my name. It's Bill Whiteside, and the organization I represent is the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. And we have taken on the role of being a catalyst in creating neighborhood housing services. We copied the program from something that's real in Pittsburgh that has a track record, and we'd looked a long time to find something that was real and seemed to be working. We copied a program that was brought about by frustration, the same frustration I think many of you have been feeling as you've looked at the urban housing problems you're living with. Frustration on the part of a group of citizens that they couldn't get their homes fixed up. Frustration on the part of city administration that they didn't have a handle on how to keep up the quality of housing in their city. And frustration on the part of people in the savings and loan industry and the commercial banks and savings banks that they didn't have a handle on how to attack this problem and didn't feel comfortable in lending in neighborhoods that we could see were slipping. The program we found, which was born out of these frustrations, brought together some simple elements, but in combination they've had a near miraculous effect. The elements are basically 5. The first one is a group of residents that believe in their neighborhood, that want to continue living there, want to protect the investment they have, and want to make that a fine place in which to bring up their families. The second element is a city that believes in that neighborhood and will begin reinvesting in it, bringing the services and the public amenities there up to a par with the rest of the city, and will back up this effort with a sensible and judicious, methodical code enforcement program to make sure that over a period of time, every single home in the neighborhood is improved and brought up to par. The third element is a group of lenders who will agree to make every single bankable loan that this program generates in that neighborhood, every loan where the homeowner meets their underwriting criteria, where the homeowner can obviously pay the loan back. The fourth element is a high-risk revolving loan fund. And high risk is almost a misnomer because in Pittsburgh it hasn't been that high a risk. But there are people who don't meet the criteria of any financial institution, who because of age or credit history or income can't receive a loan through our normal process. So you need a source of funds to make them loans that they can handle. In Pittsburgh, the revolving loan fund was provided over a period of 4 years by the Sarah Scaife Foundation. In other cities, we've been assisted by the Ford Foundation in a matching grant, a challenge grant, to stimulate local philanthropies to build a high-risk revolving loan fund. And in Cincinnati, we've been encouraged that the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation will make such a matching grant. And the fifth and final element is a highly qualified technical staff that will assist the homeowner in dealing with the contractors, will counsel him on the work that needs to be done, will determine whether or not they're bankable or unbankable, refer the bankable homeowners to the participating financial institutions, and if they're unbankable, will recommend a loan that they can handle, down to 0% if necessary, so that homeowner can deal with the problems on his home. These 5 elements are the thing that make this program come together and work and give it the possibility of turning around a neighborhood.
The Federal Home Loan Bank of Cincinnati served as a catalyst in putting together the Cincinnati program by first putting up $23,000 of the developmental costs. The commercial banks put up matching funds to the savings and loans contribution, which totaled about $40,000. That gave the Madisonville project a substantial operating budget.
The problems we faced initially in coming into the community were several, and the first one was just the downright suspicion and the hostility between the bankers, the neighborhood people, the elected officials, and the bureaucrats. Nobody trusted anybody, and it took us several meetings and several weeks and months to get all this ironed out. Then secondly was getting into the community, establishing credibility in the community, letting them know what we were and what we intended to do, and finding a place, a physical location for our operation. We were looking for an office that would be more than an office. It could act as a demonstration to give people an idea of what they could do with their own homes. First thing we did on the outside, before we got inside, was paint the trim, make some impact on the outside so that people could see some physical change right away. So we changed the trim from a dull white to a bright gold to catch people's eye and also to, again, sort of spruce the place up. Then we came inside and the walls were cracked and had 5 or 6 coats of wallpaper on them. And we stripped them all down with using young people in the neighborhood. And we bought surplus automobile top covering, vinyl top covering, and we used it for wall covering. Then we painted the woodwork, we sanded the floors, polished the floors, polished brass doorknobs that have been here for 100 years and had been neglected, cleaned up the lighting fixtures and polished them. We stripped a couple of the old fireplaces, exposing the oak and the walnut, that for whatever reason someone had decided to paint up, I guess in an attempt to modernize the place. The front door, it's a hardwood, either maple or oak. We took it down, it has beveled glass on it. We took it down and took it to a stripping company that removes paint here in the neighborhood. And for $14, we found out we had a $250 door. So by doing those kind of things, we've attempted in a very practical way to show people here in Madisonville the value of the intrinsic value of the homes that they have, and that they've more or less begun to ignore because of the general notion that the mass media has conveyed that if it's not new, it's worthless as far as housing is concerned.
Well, the code enforcement program is an essential ingredient of the neighborhood housing services program. It's the vehicle that the city, contribution the city makes to making the program work.
Porch railing has been repaired, the deck has been repaired, the gutter up across the top has to be replaced.
Well, code inspection is an essential part of what we're doing here in the Madisonville area with the housing service. In that the inspectors give the homeowner from door to door in the blocks that we pick out, they give the homeowner a detailed list of what is wrong with his or her property. It also helps us systematically attack the housing ills of the community on a block-by-block basis. So there's some systemic remedy to the problems here in the community, not rather than doing it on a helter-skelter basis.
The city of Cincinnati has been working with NML since its conception in the fact that within the space of time, every house in the Madisonville area will be inspected. We feel that we're making these houses safer for the public. In fact, these houses are well over 30 to 45 years of age, where the electricity is not insufficient for the amount of appliances they have. The plumbing is old, deteriorating to a great extent. Some of the wood is rotting, and that's what the code enforcement is for, to make all houses safe and sanitary for the public.
Without the code inspectors sensitively enforcing the code and defining what's wrong with the homes, I don't think we'd be very effective.
We look upon the neighborhood housing services program in Madisonville here in Cincinnati as a great contribution to our improvement of that neighborhood. And we're spending about $300,000 or more in public investment in street work, other activities such as cleanup of property that we think is going to contribute and was necessary in this neighborhood.
Everyone has a distinct role, and everyone has to buy in completely and function with more than just money, but they have to actively participate.
We think that with this added city service, it'll be a contribution that'll help make the neighborhood housing services work.
The elements that are needed to make the program successful, to make any impact at all, are a coordination, an effective coordination of the neighborhood, the local government, the city government, and the financial institutions.
Now we have here in Madisonville an organization that that's operated up at the M House. They are trying to help homeowners find low interest rate home improvement loans, and they have been instrumental in sending a journeyman here for me to obtain bids on work to be done, and they've also been quite helpful in finding a financing company for me at a low interest rate.
I wish you could have seen the place before I started on it. There was, there was a wall here where you're looking with plaster hanging, the ceilings, plaster was hanging down and cracked all over. I couldn't have put this all together, what I'm doing there, without the help of M House. They helped me to contact the previous owner and helped me to get financing.
Well, this was an old house, and I had a good chance of buying it at a decent price, and I know how to do lots of the work on there. Very little what I had to have paid to do. And so I decided to to redecorate the house some, and with the my know-how and the little money, then I'll turn it into this.
One of the reasons why we would commit ourselves to Madisonville would be that with the number of associations, and by associations I mean mortgage lenders and commercial banks and involved in the program and committed to the area, helps to arrest the decay. And this is a concern that we have in the mortgage business, in that we are looking out 15 or 20 years or even longer with the life of the loan. And as a consequence, when we can be assured that at least the decay is a concern of all and hopefully is arrested, and we can see a return to a viable community, it gives us a lot more confidence in our judgments.
The banker not only has to make the loan, but then the banker has to be willing to come into the neighborhood and see what's going on and bring the kind of influence and pressure that he can bring in certain situations, that only he can bring in certain situations, to bring about some change maybe that the individual who needs a loan would need.
We're in the private real estate development business, and we're interested in finding new opportunities in developing and building and selling single-family houses. One of the reasons why we chose the Madisonville area was primarily because of the Madisonville Housing Services. It seems to represent that other people do have an interest in this community and has every opportunity of continuing to be upgraded through their efforts.
I'd been looking around in this area for quite some time and sort of afraid to move back because it was depressed to a certain extent. But after friends of mine had started buying, and I realized that these were good deals on houses, and I also realized that the only way to really change an area is to buy a house and live in it.
Well, I bought this house about a half a year ago and did extensive remodeling in it. And I guess buying into this area or into this neighborhood was a bit of a chance. As it's turned out, this neighborhood has worked out real well.
We've been renting a townhouse over near here in Cincinnati, and the house was discovered through Enhlish and brought to our attention through the building inspector. And we decided to take up the house and rebuild it. This part of the city was going downhill for probably 8, 9 years. And Enhlish moved in here. See a definite change in the community attitude of the people around us. It's pretty fantastic, I think, to be able to come up and take an old house like this and rebuild it and make it into something that's worthwhile and useful. A lot of hard work went into this place, and it's a shame to see it go down the drain.
Our problems now are maintaining some continuity, making sure that bankers haven't just viewed this as a noble experiment and I made my 1 or 2 loans and now I don't have to do it anymore. We have to make sure that the city officials don't decide, well, we did our experiment there and we saw some success, and that they not just absolutely forget about Madisonville and move on to another neighborhood, but we have to see to it that that continues to move along as it should. Thirdly, and most important of all, the people in the community themselves have to continue to exercise their prerogatives of being vigilant and aggressive in demanding and obtaining the services that they need in the community. Because that's how the deterioration began in Madisonville. So that's the kind of thing we have to make sure that the notion of apathy, the phenomenon of apathy, doesn't resurface.
One of the critical questions facing America, we at the Federal Home Loan Bank Board believe, is the conservation of our existing housing stock. With the cost of new housing and the need for housing on the part of low and moderate income people in this country, it's essential that ways be developed to deal with this problem. We feel that neighborhood housing services is a way, not the only way. It's not the answer to all of our problems, but it's a pilot method of getting the financial industry and getting cities and neighborhood groups into the action and getting a vehicle established which can take new programs that come along and new ideas that are developed in the future and put them to work in this job of conserving housing.
NHS has worked very well in Madisonville, and it's worked because of the people involved. It's a self-help program that depends on relationships among the people.
I think what we have going here in Madisonville, and what's beginning to happen in other parts of the country, particularly where NHS is working, is that we're reviving the interest of the individual in defining his own problem and then doing something about it. I can't do anything in Madisonville to change anything in Madisonville. The people who live here are the people who bring about the real change. All we do is provide the mechanisms.